G'day everyone. So I'm an engineering manager at Red Hat that is responsible for the systems enablement team. We enable OpenShift on vSphere and IBM P&Z. Excuse me, wrong time. It's some of the public cloud stuff, IBM Cloud, Nutanix, all the different platforms, and one of the other teams I have is OKD, and I'm here to talk to you all about that. It's a quick agenda. I've got a few things I want to go through. OKD and CentOS and the relationship, the value proposition of OKD, the benefits and the opportunities that are there, the target users for OKD, which is not a authoritative list or the only target users, the workflow of OKD, and some of our plans in the upcoming future. So let me just make this a bit bigger so I can see it better. All right, so OKD is aiming to be a fast-moving Kubernetes distribution, though we're currently a little bit slower than we would like to be. We did, thanks to the community, we were able to release 4.16 and 4.17 at the same time in December. And they were the first releases that were entirely built on top of CentOS Stream content. Prior to the 4.16 and 4.17 release, the containers were all rail-based and were essentially the same content as OpenShift. And we went through a process last year where we had to shut down building and shipping OKD, and we moved to building everything entirely on top of CentOS Stream. So it was kind of a big move. And then the core OS that's used in OKD, historically, most people used Fedora core OS, and we're using CentOS Stream-based core OS for everything going forward. We've left the door open that we could do a Fedora core OS again, or the community could do a Fedora core OS. We don't want to say never, absolutely not, but the main focus that we're working on to ensure that we're somewhat focused in what we're doing and get the most value, and in our pivot towards making OpenShift, or making OKD be the upstream of OpenShift, we want to focus on CentOS Stream, as it's much closer to what OpenShift runs on and gives us an OA signal for things in OpenShift, like when Parallel version bumps. One of the goals that we have is to share tooling and processes as much as possible. Primarily with OpenShift, we don't want to go through a process where we use different build systems and different release tooling and stuff like that. We want to do it the same, but at the same time, we also want to engage in the CentOS community and use the same tooling and processes there. There is some RPMs that we bring into OKD, and they're all built in CBS as part of the Cloud SIG, and the built-in tags there. And we want to make sure that it's usable for people, so we've got some people in the community that are working on an operator bundle, thanks to Zed in the back there, where we have KubeVirt and things available to run on top of OKD. So at the moment, OKD is largely a consumer of CentOS Stream, and as we build an OKD community, I want to ensure that we are good CentOS citizens and giving back as we can, and I could certainly use the help, or we can use the help from the CentOS community to tell us ways that we can engage in CentOS better. So OKD, the value proposition as I see it, and as I've kind of pitched it to the people inside of Red Hat that I needed to get approval from to invest in OKD and make it be a viable thing, is as follows. OKD builds and the containers, everything CentOS Stream. That is in part, as I said before, to increase, to detect when things break and get an early signal, but it also gives us a way to enable people to contribute from external. So ideally, everyone should be able to contribute and participate in OKD. We also want to make sure that we don't distribute any rel content as part of OKD, which is another factor. There was a discussion as we change things whether we base most of the containers on UBI, because UBI content is free, but there is some content that goes into OpenShift and OKD that comes outside of the content that is in UBI. And for simplicity's sake, we opted to move everything to CentOS stream. We want to make sure that everyone can contribute, and if you got parts of it that are behind a paywall or behind a Red Hat wall, it doesn't make much sense. The VCSP is a verified cloud service provider, and I think this is an area where potentially there is a lot of opportunity for people. It is targeted largely at smaller clouds, where the cloud provider does the install of OpenShift, and they run the OPCT, which is a tool, certification tool, and it validates that this meets OpenShift criteria, and they then they show us and prove to us that it runs properly, and we say yes, you can call it as supported OpenShift. Ideally, in my mind, that work happens before it ever becomes part. Before it doesn't happen in OpenShift. It happens like in OKD, and like anyone that wants to add, whether it be a cloud provider or if someone comes up with a new virtualization stack or whatever, if they're wanting to make OpenShift run on their product, they would do that in OKD, prove that it works, prove the value of it, and then it gets merged into the product and becomes a thing. But it's possibly not a big thing for the CentOS community, but I think it's a way that it adds value to OKD and enables people to experiment and do things. Ideally, I'd also like to have OKD just people be able to do things that we don't necessarily want to, like if you're a Red Hat person working on OpenShift and you're like, I hate the scheduler, I don't, just to follow on from Alessandro, like if you don't like the scheduler, you want to redo it, you should be able to experiment like you can with CentOS with the SIGs and stuff like that. You should be able to experiment, throw out the scheduler, write your own scheduler, put it in, and then go to the, come and say, hey, look, this scheduler works 100% better, it's less overhead, and things get scheduled in half the time on whatever it is. There should be a playground in OKD where you can experiment and try different things. And then the other big value proposition that I think that we can get with OKD is just the continual adoption of Kubernetes. So if you look at, Kubernetes releases 3 times a year today. They changed from 4 to 3 a while ago. They release 3 times a year, so about every 4 months. And every time there's a Kubernetes release, Red Hat rebases that, and it takes a lot of time and effort. Ideally, what I would like to see is a way that we can, as things are going into Kubernetes upstream, we're pulling them into OKD and integrating it and testing it as the development is going, and that way, ideally, we would release the OKD release much sooner than others, and pick up the new versions of Kubernetes quicker. I think today OpenShift releases 12 or 16 weeks or something like that after, it's about 3 or 4 months after a Kubernetes release, OpenShift releases on top of that, and I would like OKD to be releasing like 3 or 4 weeks after the Kubernetes release, and having an OKD release on that out sooner. And I think that adds a lot of value for Kubernetes to an extent, certainly for Red Hat, and certainly for like CentOS and stuff where you can try, latest and greatest things sooner than, you would today. There's a few benefits and opportunities. Some of the big opportunities is allowing external contributions. That has things that we need. There's currently no contributor guidelines, so like the Fedora packaging guidelines and CentOS packaging guidelines, we don't have defined mechanisms like I want to build, there's, say KubeVirt. I want to make sure KubeVirt's available to run on OKD. We don't have a mechanism today for, someone to say, how do I package that up? How should I ensure that it works, integrate it, get it in? So, that is something that we need, and something we need to work on is just defining contributor guidelines, lots of documentation, and all the different parts that go into it to make a community. Because right now, OKD there is a small community that's very passionate, and given the resources that have been allocated to it, it has delivered a lot, but it has got a lot of potential and a lot of room for growth. Ideally, I'd like to have it give us much better flexibility, like this scheduler thing I talked about. Like, you should be able to throw anything out, or if you want to get rid of the console or replace the console, you should be able to do that. And to date, there's not really an easy way to completely wholesale replace something in OpenShift, because you need to ensure continuality, and I think OKD offers that opportunity to enable people to experiment and do the things that they may want to do. So we do have a set of target users that we've been, at least I've defined as, these are the core places that we'd like to go after. One of them is developers who write applications that run on Kubernetes. It could be that in your day job you write applications that live on top of OpenShift, and you like writing code for fun, and you want to do some hobby projects or something like that at home. OKD should be a place where you like, that's where I want to be. It's similar to OpenShift, but it is not OpenShift, and allows you to do that. Students that are developing, and it was pointed out to me earlier that also researchers, like people that are in academia, don't have money, but they're wanting to learn how to develop applications. They want to learn how to, maybe it's a sysadmin that just wants to learn, like, how do I run Kubernetes? How do I run a cluster? OKD should be an ideal target for them, whether it be a single node use case or multi-node cluster, or different types of environments where you can develop or run things in any kind of environment. Self-sufficient technologists, so that's smaller businesses that, or an example that I have of that is like CERN, who use a lot of open source stuff. They have a lot of sysadmins. The money that they get, they would rather not pay for software. They want to support themselves. They are comfortable supporting themselves. They're comfortable digging into code, fixing bugs, or they're comfortable reaching out to the community and saying, hey, I'm doing this thing and it's broken, but they're willing to dig in, and they don't want to have someone that they call up and say, hey, your thing's not working, fix it. They're very much a target user, I think, for OKD. Red Hat partners that want to work on support, so like Oracle Cloud, we enabled in OpenShift recently. Oracle are doing all the work to support that. They're using OPCT and the tooling that we provide to validate everything. They should be doing that work first in OKD and engaging in the community side of things, rather than putting it straight into the product, and then the other use case that I have, and this is not the extent, is internal teams inside of Red Hat that, like RDO use OKD to develop OpenStack, and they should also be target users for OKD. So the workflow of how things get in, and I think it's somewhat critical in that I want to ensure that people don't bypass, like CentOS or Kubernetes in getting things into OKD and just trying to put things straight into OKD. The feature development should go as upstream as possible. So if it's a change in core Kubernetes, you shouldn't do that in OKD, you should do that in Kubernetes. If it's a change in the underlying operating system, that should go into CentOS stream first. It shouldn't go into some RPM that we shouldn't be forking RPMs and putting them into our builds just because we want to change something and we want to bypass the process. It should go as upstream, all the work should go as upstream as possible so that it benefits everyone, not just the OKD users and community. The work that goes directly into OKD should be things like the console and things that are part of OpenShift that only exist inside of OpenShift. They're not, they're living on top of Kubernetes, they're not inside of Kubernetes. Those types of things should be developed inside of OKD. And then that flows into the product. At least that's how I feel, and that's the way that I'm trying to push things so that we engage in the communities and are good citizens and not just taking advantage and not giving back. So in the shorter term, we've got some plans. Right now, OKD, as I said, we had 4.16, 4.17 releases in December. They're installable in some use cases, but unfortunately, due to weird reasons, like bare metal is not easily installable today. And one of the things we need for that is to actually push out some CentOS stream-based boot images. And so I've been working with Fabian today on how we can get them. There's builds, the CoreOS team has taken on building CoreOS and delivering CoreOS based on CentOS stream specifically for OKD. But we need to get that, they're building that in the internal Red Hat pipeline, and we need to get those builds published out so that we can consume them in OKD. Getting the text is really small and in front of me here, and I couldn't read it. Getting, just laying a foundation for a community, because OKD historically was the output of the OpenShift build process, and it was kind of a byproduct that happened to come out, and we pushed it out and made it available. And so I'm trying to set up a community around OKD and build. I'm getting a small team to help manage the build and release process, but they're going to be targeted with doing the community, but it is a new effort and it's coming along slowly. In the medium term, we want to get things like managing updates properly. At the moment, we use a release controller that creates the update graphs, and there's some limitations in that. There's some infrastructure changes that we need to make around how we do OKD that needs to be better. There's a lot of things that need to be better and a lot of things that need to be built up, but it is slowly getting there. And ideally, I'd like to support multi-arch. I'm a big believer in it. My laptop is ARM. All my machines I use at home are all ARM. And currently, OKD is x86 only due to some limitations in PRAL, the system that is used to build all of the containers, and want to get away from that and at least support ARM, if not PowerNZ as well. And ultimately, in the long term, we want OKD to be a good Kubernetes citizen and be a certified Kubernetes distribution. To date, OKD has never been submitted upstream into Kubernetes to be considered a Kubernetes compliant thing, and we want to be part of that community and be good citizens there. And we want to integrate community-built operators and make things better for kind of everyone. So it's a rough timeline, a rough roadmap of like when we want to, and this isn't purely from my viewpoint because I've not gotten buy-in from the community yet, and but it's what we're working towards. So, questions? Things that you think we could do better, or things CentOS would like to see from a Kubernetes that runs on top of CentOS. OKD? Yeah. In theory, OKD, so the question was, what does it stand for? In theory, I believe it doesn't actually stand for anything. Most people say it's it's kind of a recursive. The KD is Kubernetes distribution. What the O stands for, it's not entirely clear to me. Maybe Amy knows or someone else knows. Yeah. So OpenShift 3, like the open upstream version of OpenShift 3 was Origin, and I think largely the O is just O.
So this isn't a question, this is just thank you. Sorry, wow, I didn't expect to get emotional from that. Thank you for taking it from Rail to CentOS Stream and making it CentOS Stream based. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Any more?
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis.